Okay, so thank you everyone for coming today. Like Rob said, we're here today to get to the heart of your UX issues. And from what I've heard, the biggest UX issue a lot of folks see is one that is of a cultural change, right? It's been 20 some years since user experience started its transition to the masses. And it's 20 years since it was human factors, peopled by master's degree folks, PhDs working on big, important projects, to what we have today, which is UX everywhere, done by anyone, for just about everything, right? You would think this would garner us influence and respect, but in a lot of ways, we had more influence and respect when it was a rarefied practice. So many of us are struggling to get influence on projects and influence within our own organizations. So, as we continue here, you might be wondering, what makes me qualified to talk about this subject? Well, my official title has had UX in it since 2007. Because of this, I call myself an old lady of UX. I've worked at agencies on marketing things. I've worked at agencies on products and apps and digital strategies. And I've worked in-house on business critical software for healthcare. I wasn't one of the people who had an HCI or a human factors master's degree or a PhD, but I was mentored by them. What I did instead was maybe the most UX thing a UX person could do. I got my MBA so I could understand why things were the way they are in organizations. I wanted to understand what makes a business work, from that strapped startup to the unrelenting bureaucracy of the large organization. I had to embed with my audience, right? So that brings us today to talk about the business of UX. Well, let's talk about this first, though. Before we get too deep into it, we need to talk about hammers and nails, because we all have hammers and we all have nails. I've spent almost my entire career in UX, and everything is a design challenge to me that can be improved by UX. You're likely this way within your own discipline. If, like me, UX is your hammer, you first need to identify if what you have here is a nail, right? And you do that by thinking about where the money comes from in your organization. And this is a very good question. Where does the money come from? Let's say you're staying at a hotel. Wouldn't that be nice, right? You're staying at a hotel. If you forgot something or want to know where to get good coffee in walking distance, let's say that rather than ask the concierge or the front desk, you are encouraged to use their app, or you can tap away at a kiosk in the lobby. And this is a great user experience for you because you're a budget or a business hotel customer where people are in a hurry. They don't want to be bothered, right? They don't want to go to the wait in line behind the entire travel basketball team that's checking into this hotel. You want to use that app. But now imagine you're paying $1,000 a night for this hotel. Do you really expect your hotel concierge to be a kiosk or an app that you have to download? Probably not. In this case, the value in the brand is more likely to be high-touch customer service than their fabulous digital products, right? I give you this example because it's important to think about who your customers are and who your end users are and what they want. What are their expectations and goals? What value does your business or your product provide to them? Consider this as you determine how to move forward with UX at your organization. Now, let's talk a little bit about your organization and what kind of UX practice exists there. There are 4 different types of UX in organizations that I've identified. And one is where there really is no UX at your organization, right? Another is maybe an organization where someone has recognized the need for UX and they've adopted that role. Or you have a very, very small team in that position. Or you work at an organization where a UX person or team is there and your team has to borrow them, right? It's a shared service. It belongs to another area. Or you work somewhere that has a funded UX team with a mandate and a budget and all those good things. So if you still don't know where you stand, we'll break it down a little bit. Characteristics of no UX, right? This is UX by committee, the loudest opinion. Maybe your user is being compared to someone's mom or someone else on the team, something like that. And you hear complaints maybe that when people have encountered the final product, it just doesn't make sense or it's just not working right. If you have emerging UX, this is when you have one person or a small team, and you may only find out that a project needed UX once it's in development or worse, after you saw it live. There might be some turf wars. There might be your UX team. Yeah, they might be pretty burnt out, right? They might feel alone in the company. And then, of course, there's borrowed UX, which I think a lot of people have. This is when it's challenging them maybe to get on the schedule of the UX team, or while they're great and they provide you ideas or wireframes and they really help you out, as your project moved on, as your product is growing, they're no longer on your team and you have to try to get on their schedule again, right? They may not have time to help with implementation or to be around that much. Even those lucky folks with the funded UX team may really have too much work for the amount of people that are there. Or maybe you have a great team, but you're just not involved in every stage like you would like to be. All this brings us to the overarching UX goal that I think a lot of us want for our companies. And that is a culture of UX thinking where the needs of users are respected and prioritized. So regardless of your starting point, whether you're that no UX team or you have a mandate, you want a culture where people always consider the experience, whether they're in marketing, development, or maybe a project manager, a product owner, business analyst, QA person. You want all those people involved and considering the user experience in every decision they make. Because of this, UX needs change management. Whether it's about one project or the whole organization, introducing UX and gaining wider adoption of UX thinking is a big change management project. And so let's solve it like that. Organizational change is absolutely required. Based on my experience and the experience of my colleagues, UX has gained ground at organizations in a couple different ways. One is that organic growth, right? Where somebody identifies a need and fills it. Another is when the company decides they have a need and they're like, let's staff this up. Let's get some people. Let's get a manager. Let's get a director, whatever we need. Another is like when you acquire a UX agency to help. That is famously Capital One and Adaptive Path. Or maybe you rely on partnerships with consultants and agencies because of your level of demand. Every single one of these needs an organizational change, and UX could either thrive, stay the same, die, depending on how well the change was accepted, whether you bought Adaptive Path or whether you are growing organically. So what I'm going to do today is share one framework and two approaches that will help you get to your UX goal. And remember how I mentioned that I had an MBA earlier, like people with MBAs tend to do? That was a Chekhov gun for this because no one ever mentions their MBA without bringing it up again. And the MBA in me is now going to introduce a framework that I learned back in the day at business school, John Kotter's amazing 8-step process for leading change. So they can be taken in any order. And for all of you purists out there, note that this is just my interpretation of this framework. It's in the spirit of it. If you're familiar with it, you might notice some places where I'm doing some advanced framework bending. Got out the welding kit. But let's start just by running these over quickly. It's urgency, coalition, vision, volunteers, removing barriers, short-term wins, sustained acceleration, and instituting change. We're going to start by talking about how you can get UX thinking embedded in your organization. This is the big view. You're going to start by creating a sense of urgency. And this is examining and thinking of ways that a culture of UX could impact your bottom line. So a great user experience can be a product differentiator. It can increase overall online sales. It could increase engagement or efficiency if you're a productivity app. Without a culture of UX, you can't expect the vision that was sent forth by the experience design team to be stewarded throughout implementation, right? We all know how much a feature, a website, or an application evolves and changes as it's being built. You find out new things, you make changes. Having more people actively participating in creating the best experience ensures that the best experience actually happens. Implementation details matter, and a lot of times developers, QA people, project managers, BAs are making these decisions in lieu of a user experience professional. And that's perfectly okay. And by having all these people from other practice areas thinking deeply about the experience, you'll have a more sound implementation from the user experience perspective. So if you're trying to weave UX into your organization, you need to be prepared to demonstrate what an impact user experience could have if everybody's thinking that way. You also need to build a guiding coalition. So you want more UX thinking across the organization. The people who will help you get there are not on the UX team. It's not the single person at the top who owns the company. You'll succeed by identifying influencers who are from different parts of the organization who have a different range of experience levels. I think we all know these people. These are the folks whose opinion counts out in the wild, right? Who is everyone's favorite developer? Who is the magical project manager with the happy, high-functioning team? Which of the BAs knows literally everything about how everything works here? You want to tap into these people and turn them into believers in UX and convince them to be your allies. You also need to form a strategic vision and initiatives. And this is the future you want to see. This is actually the exciting part. I say but just because it's thoughtful. How will you make that happen? Let's say your vision is that all web or app decisions thoughtfully consider the user experience. I think this is a fantastic vision, and everyone, because, I'm a UX hammer. I think this is the vision everyone should have. So to make it happen, you just can't say everybody needs to be thoughtful. You have to give people the right tools. These tools could include techniques for perspective taking, for seeing the product through someone else's eyes. It could be about creative brainstorming around how a new feature could be misused. It could be something as simple as remembering that time when maybe you had a web page that had an anchor link on it. And when you watched a usability testing session, you noticed the user clicked that anchor link, scooted down to the bottom of the page, and thought they were on a whole new page because somebody skipped adding smooth scroll there, right? That's something that once you see that, you'll never skip smooth scroll again. These are little examples, sure, but when everybody's thinking this way, your implementation is much better. And when you focus on the vision and give people tangible examples like this, they can imagine what the end state of a high-performing UX organization looks like. Also, you need to enlist a volunteer army. You may already have a handful of influencers on board, right? But you need that volunteer army. And I'm going to really say it has to be volunteer. There is no draft in Kotter's framework. Your volunteer army has to want to participate, and they can't be conscripted into service. I think we've all been drafted onto a committee we didn't want to be on, and we didn't have a whole lot of fun on that, did we? So when you have this volunteer army, you need ways to engage them. I like to combine volunteerism with creating awareness. I'm going to share a few things I've seen work effectively at other companies to keep UX top of mind. Some of them we also use here at Sparkbox. And these can also be really helpful in leveling up members of the team who don't have as much UX experience or understanding. First, build awareness by using Slack or Teams or your company intranet, whatever you've got. So with this idea, once a week, you get somebody in your volunteer army to post a UX fun fact in the general Slack channel or on the intranet in Teams. And what counts as a fun fact? Sometimes it's explaining a best practice. Other times it's a video or a screenshot of a bad user interface, and you ask people to suggest ways to fix it. Some weeks it can be as simple as a good article that you summarize because everything is too long to read, right? So whatever it is, you have to do it weekly, rain or shine. And it needs to be in people's faces so they can't really ignore it. It needs to be in the atmosphere. Sometimes it will feel like nobody reads it, but then later you'll hear someone mention it in passing, or someone will send you some bad UX for a future post. This reader mail is how you know it's working. Another idea is a book club. We do this at Sparkbox, where every other week, our design team and other interested people gather over lunch to discuss a UX book. This is totally voluntary, even for the design team. In truth, maybe I'm the only person who actually has to read the book. In the past year, we've only canceled one meeting due to a freakishly popular vacation week. We read a dozen books and picked up members from development, from project management, and from communication teams, which outside of back office, that's picking up members all across Sparkbox. And did I mention it's entirely optional? Even reading the book is optional because you can pick up a lot from discussion from what other people have read. Another thing to do is to never miss an opportunity to talk about UX, or even better, to show UX. If you do team demos or lunch and learns, share what you're doing. I will forever show usability testing clips in client demos, in internal demos, whenever anybody gives me a chance, because it's good TV. And once you see a user not notice a tab system or fumble their way through a form, you gain a lot of perspective for that human behind the device. And even if it wasn't on the project you were working on, you learn a new thing to check on the next design or the next implementation that you're working on. Also, show concepts you considered and discarded, and tell people why you considered them and discarded them. Share quotes from user interviews. Talk about the process. All this goes a long, long way to establishing the value of UX and helping people understand why it's important. If they know what you do, they'll know what value you add. Another thing, work on projects together. Think of something you need from a UX perspective and solve it together. Use the volunteer army for this. For example, our book club did a big UX research project about mobile navigation. We encountered a problem and we thought we wanted more information on how to best solve for mobile navigation. So we all split up a bunch of websites, did heuristic evaluations of them, picked our best examples of mobile navigation, and did usability testing on that, where everybody got a chance to moderate, to note take, to whatever. And we made a big, awesome report, and it was a great learning experience and a fun collaboration. We did it so that we would be smarter, so that the rest of Sparkbox would be smarter, and so our clients could be smarter. So we got a lot of value out of that. And in the process, we created a lot of awareness. We attracted people to the cause, and we gave them a way to participate that contributed to the vision of creating a high-functioning UX thinking culture. So there are always going to be barriers, and you can find them. You may already know them, but think about past changes that didn't take. What went wrong? Is there too much hierarchy where you are, or too many procedures and rules? Is there that classic phrases like, we tried that before and it didn't work, or, nah, it's not really how we work here. Are you hearing those sorts of things? This is when you can tap your guiding coalition to help you remove these barriers. And also having this volunteer army behind you will also do a bit to tamp down barriers. Short-term wins, always fun. So remember to talk about them and celebrate them. For me, it's a win when someone new joins the book club. That makes me super happy. Or when someone sends a screenshot of a bad UX and tells me there's something wrong with it, or when they remember to invite a UX person onto a project when they have a question. Those are all small wins, short-term wins, but they're great, right? And in the end, they add up to a big culture shift. And sustain acceleration. This is a big one. This is where I think a lot of things go wrong, in that you maybe get too busy and you take a week off, right? And then 1 week becomes 2 weeks, and then suddenly no one's coming to your book club anymore, right? Because they forgot, they booked something else over that time slot, etc. You need to really keep the momentum that you've gained and kind of like put your foot down on the pedal and go a little bit faster. Remind everyone of the vision, grow the number of volunteers. The more people you have, the less work it'll feel like, and don't ever take a week off. You need to keep rinsing and repeating on all these steps until it's second nature. And then you have, ta-da, change. So that's just one approach for getting widespread adoption of UX thinking in your organization. Hope you were able to jot down a couple ideas that you could try from that. But we're going to, again, take these 8 steps that we now know pretty well, and we're going to apply them to another situation. In this approach, let's take these 8 steps and let's find a small initial project and then let the project do the work for you. So in a sense, we're jumping from thinking about UX at a high level, ingraining it in a culture, and now supporting UX in practice. So imagine, if you don't have a UX team, imagine that you have a solo UX team or a small team at your disposal, and you have a project that's in need of some love. Our first step, you can already guess, is creating a sense of urgency. So cast your mind all the way back to the beginning of this talk when we talked about that hotel and the app. Think about how your company makes money, and then look at this project you've been presented with. Is this project aligned with how your company makes money? If yes, you picked a good one and you should run with it. You'll have a positive impact on the bottom line and improve support for UX. Now, next, you really do have to determine what type of difference UX can make to the project. And you need to think beyond just happier users or the classic, because UX is the right thing to do. A lot of things are the right thing to do. But what I want you to do instead is bust out your pencil, do some math, and calculate the return on investment. So what kind of return on investment can UX provide to your company? Well, when you use ability test, you can measure task completion rates. You can do benchmark tests and then work on a new design until it beats it. You can measure efficiency by number of clicks, by the perception of time elapsed, first click testing, and so on. You can also use analytics to measure engagement and completion rate improvements, or measure the reduction of customer service inquiries or customer satisfaction ratings. You need to figure out what the metric is for your project and then tie your UX to it. Now that you have this reason to change, which is going to be save money, make money, free up a person's time so that you can save money or make more money, and make the case for why the company should do it now. Because they're already redesigning, because they're adding a big new feature, or because they're making something totally new. Tell everyone why UX should be involved and give them the number on why it will be important to include you. Here we are at Guiding Coalition. When you're on a project, the Guiding Coalition is often your high-level project advocates. This is your project manager, your product owner, a technical architect, a manager, a director. These kinds of people will talk up UX and get others on board. And you want to nurture these relationships so UX starts to spread. You need that strategic vision and initiatives. So think about the ways that UX can benefit this project and the larger organization. User experience work on a project can include everything from deep user research and ethnographic field studies, cutting-edge design, rigorous, statistically valid usability testing. and more. With a brand new or a growing UX team, or even a mature UX team, you probably won't have the budget and the time to do everything. For this sample project, you need to think about the tactics that will solve multiple problems, and then you need to pick your battles. Take a look at the goals. If you know that moderated usability testing with real customers is going to deliver results and give you those key video snippets that can really make an impact with the rest of the team working on the project as it solves usability issues, then make sure you get to do that, even if it's at the expense of something else. If you know that there is a process flow or two that are super mission critical to the success of the project, focus a ton of your energy on making that process perfect. Let the admin panel or whatever else is there kind of fall to the wayside a little bit. Do a good job, but don't put all your effort there, because if you're a success with those big flows, then they'll actually invite you back to fix that other stuff later, right? If that big flow isn't a success, you won't be called back, will you? So you need this volunteer army. And in this case, you need to encourage folks to get involved, whether they're on the UX team or not, right? Like we talked about in the beginning, implementation is where a lot of UX happens. So just about everybody can be involved during usability testing and user interviews, and everyone on the team is able to problem solve interfaces and interactions. Exposing folks to UX in practice will help build support and understanding of what's possible. Take the time to share what you know and to overshare what you know, and it will pay dividends in the implementation. And of course, our fun barriers. These can be internal and external. And sometimes they're internal because we strive for perfection, or we can become convinced, or someone on the team is convinced that there's one right way to do something. You need to support your team by upholding a something is better than nothing philosophy as you get started. There's not always going to be enough time or a big enough budget, but you can make a difference in small ways. For example, I hear this a lot, that you can't get access to real users for research or testing. I once did a project for Kodak, and Kodak, for those of you who don't know, once made cameras and film, and that was back when Kodak, when there was cameras and film. Anyway, they weren't allowed to concept test new things with anyone who wasn't employed by Kodak in some fashion. Everything was top secret. So they relied on folks from payroll and HR and maintenance to act like real customers, because in a way they were. They provided better information than not getting the product into people's hands at all. Even if you're working on a top secret space shuttle control panel, which I guess so many of us on this call are, chances are someone that's being paid by the company has enough understanding and experience to try out your user interface and tell you whether button A is just too close to button B, and that you'd better not hit button B when you mean button A, right? And then there are always external barriers, and that's why you made those friends with the people up in the guiding coalition. Maybe they can help make the case for outside help. Maybe they can free up someone else to help you. Maybe they can unblock someone for you or something for you. And maybe the barrier is winning the trust of your team. For this, I'm serious about giving away everything you've learned on the project. Encourage your UX folks to show snippets of interviews or videos of usability testing. Give them the platform to talk about personas, remind people that personas exist. If UX leads to ideas that are maybe controversial, talk about the usability practices, best practices, and heuristics that were applied to them, or how this decision happened. Educate everyone a little and welcome their feedback and their insights, because this will make the whole team smarter. And those short-term wins. So I think you can guess what these are. Encourage your team to shoot for those low-effort, high-reward opportunities early and often, and UX will prove its value. And sustaining acceleration. This is another short one. Just because your UX team has one name-making project doesn't mean that you have a UX culture or that they'll even remember to invite you to the next project. You need to constantly work on getting that next project under your belt and always be working toward the next thing. And then, of course, you need to institute change. This is the wash, rinse, repeat step. Repeat these 7 previous steps in any particular order you like until it's second nature in your organization to include UX in the workflow. And lastly, as we wrap up here, not quite there, you'll want to make these frameworks your own. These steps don't need to be taken in order, and while they all have their merits, you might not need a whole volunteer army. You might just need 1 or 2 people for now. And maybe your short-term win is the entire project because the project is that small. Bend the framework, it'll still stand. So whether you're working on getting more UX projects or more respect on projects, or if you're trying to make your organization a more UX forward one, I hope you're able to take something from this today and give it a try when you leave Unconf. And with that, I'll say thank you, everyone, for coming today.
Hey, thanks again for checking out this video. If you want to learn more about how we're building a better web, visit us at sparkbox.com.